Children of, I want to talk to your manager parents. What has been your most embarrassing experience? When I was a young child on a long distance flight, my mother let me and my brother sleep on the floor. For safety reasons, the flight attendants told my mother that we were not allowed to sleep on the floor. She started to argue with the flight attendants, who then turned to the pilots. The pilots threatened to turn the plane around unless we get up from the floor, but she continued to argue. The pilots announced they were about to turn around because of my mother, so all the passengers got pissed. Eventually she caved in when she had all passengers and flight crew on a Boeing 747 against her. Before Value Village, Savers in the States I think, changed policies. She would cut tags to get discounts since the cashiers would basically make up whatever price they thought it would be, on the spot. If they highballed it, she would get a manager involved, and I hated that. I was with my parents on vacation and the hotel put charges on the bill by accident. My mum marched to the front desk and demanded to see the manager. There was a long line, but she cut right in front of it. The manager wasn't very helpful, probably because she was rude. So my mom went to all the other customers in line and told them that the hotel was a scam and they were ripping us off with fake charges. She made a scene. The hotel called the police and we were escorted off the premises by actual cops. I died inside. My mum demanded to see a cafe's hygiene certificate when she saw an employee go from cutting cake in the kitchen to handling money at the till, even though the real problem is going the other way. My dad just loved to argue, and he loved a deal. We were shopping in a department store, and I found a pair of pants I was mildly interested in. The pants were tagged at, let's say, $40, and the sign on the rack was all pants $25. I was mildly interested. I asked the sales clerk if they had them in my size. The clerk said those aren't supposed to be on that rack. My dad lost his shit and insisted on getting the pants $4.25 and started asking for a courtesy discount on top of that. Escalated to the floor manager and the store manager. Meanwhile, I didn't want the pants. They were okay pants, I guess. Nothing awesome. I just didn't care very much about them. I was more than happy to move on. I told my dad I didn't want the pants. By then he didn't care about what I wanted. He wanted the pants at the better price. Eventually, after like an hour of arguing, the store manager said, we're not giving you the pants at that price. Take them or leave them at $40. So we left them. Which suited me just fine, because I didn't want the pants. I might be late, but my dad once asked the guy at the Verizon wireless store to give him his own social security number, because he asked for my dad's. My dad walked out afterwards with some stranger's SS number on a post-it. I was a silent bystander, because I really wanted my first phone. My father consistently returns food to grocery stores when he is unsatisfied with the quality. The worst is when he returns the 2-pound bricks of cheddar cheese, because they went moldy before they should have. My mother is a nightmare with customer service. Even with the fact that her daughter works in customer service and deals with people like her on the daily. So many incidents stick out in my mind, but one that really embarrassed me was we were at Walmart. The stocker was struggling and dropped their price scanner thing on the ground. I was going to go help her gather her things she was struggling with when my mum came out like a bat out of hell and yelled, you know you should pick that up, people could trip, and then she darted off with a cart. I was so embarrassed I just walked away in shame. And when I pointed it out to my mum, the girl dropped it on accident. She said, well, she should be more careful. About once a month my dad gets drunk and calls various customer service centers demanding stuff. Once he finally gets off the phone, frequently 45 plus minutes later, he spends the next few days telling us all about how he slew the customer service dragon and boy, people sure don't appreciate their customers nowadays, blah blah blah. No duh, dad, you're being an asshole. No one appreciates that. If you've worked for DirecTV customer service anytime since 1996, I apologize on behalf of my dad. Right, so my mum and me went shopping, and she dropped a melon on the way out. She then claimed it was bruised and demanded a full refund. When she refused, she shouted at customer service and demanded the manager. I just sat there with a kill me now expression on my face. After, One of the customer service employees gave me a chocolate bar, so 7-year-me was happy. My mother did this in restaurants non-stop growing up. She would demand to see the manager because my burger, which I asked for medium, had some pink in it. Not a child, but I think this fits. I had this awful annoying as frick terrible neighbor who, because I'm a giant sucker, I was kind to. She asked me to come with her to dinner because it was her birthday, and I knew I was the only person on the planet who would go with her, and gosh darn it, it's her birthday, how could I say no? So, she and I went and we brought our kids, all girls, one mine, two hers. She makes her oldest do her math homework right there at the table. When the child asks her for help, mind you this is like 3rd grade math, the mum says it's too hard. I end up helping. The waiter is just fine. He comes by and takes our orders. She is already acting weird, but she always acted weird, so I didn't think much of it. Waiter comes by again and asks if we need anything. She dismisses him and waves him off and tells him no. Then like 30 seconds later turns to me and is like, can you believe how awful the waiter is? He won't even refill my drink. And just goes on about all these issues that literally don't exist. I'm like, he just asked if you needed anything. She cuts me off. I'm going to talk to the manager. Oh god. She talks to the manager like this is the worst experience she's ever had in the history of her miserable existence. I'm in shock. Her kids are their heads down. Mine is oblivious. LOL. The manager gives her like half off the meal. Oh, and the kicker? That's my half, so you only need to pay the rest. Oh gee, thanks. I left a big tip and a note on my receipt telling them the waiter was great and apologizing for the complaints that were totally not warranted. It was the second most embarrassing restaurant experience of my life. One time I was in a record store with my dad. He bought a record that was 19.99 euros. He paid using a 20 euro bill. The clerk took the money and put it in the register and gave my dad the CD in a plastic bag. I started walking off when I noticed my dad wasn't moving. As I turn around I hear him say to the record store clerk, you still have to give me my cent back. The clerk replies that they don't return 1 or 2 cents because they don't accept them and as such don't have them in the store. My dad replies by saying that is judicially impossible and asks for the manager. To make a long story short, one of the clerks gave my dad a cent from his own wallet. My mum used to run restaurants. My stepfather used to be a chef in high-end restaurants and is the kind of guy who expects to be treated better than he is currently being treated, regardless of whatever that treatment is. They are not fun to go out to eat with. The most embarrassing experience is actually their most embarrassing experience, one where I embarrassed them. My wife and I pride ourselves on being a relief table when we go out to eat. Both of us have been servers, and there's always the counterpoint to the difficult table. That's us. Barring horrible service or bad food, we are super easy customers, tip well, and try to have a good time with our server. Furthermore, we just treat people nicely. So you can imagine our disdain when my parents act like they're freaking royalty at a dinner service. My wife and I went out to dinner with them. They were being particularly tough. My mum was acting like she was Gordon Ramsay analyzing the business, critiquing everything down to the amount of bubbles in her seltzer. Looks like it's time to change the CO2. My stepdad was getting more and more heated over stupid things like the amount of ice in his drink and how the waitress didn't top off his water that he was barely sipping on fast enough. It came to a head when my stepfather ordered a steak medium well. It came back medium well, and for some reason he changed his mind that he wanted it medium rare while it was cooking and they didn't read his mind. So he gave attitude, as did my mom. They jumped really quickly to demanding free stuff. I'm an adult and this may be the first time they realized this. I interrupted in front of the server and said something like, really? This is what you're doing? That's what you ordered? I turned to the server and said we do not need anything calmed. I then pulled out my wallet and handed her my card and said this is for the bill. We'll happily wrap up with what we have here. I'm very sorry for their behavior, you're doing great. Then the line that stung them so deep they still bring it up years later. I was taught to treat people nicely, a lesson that seems to be forgotten. Thank you. They turned red, the server walked away, I looked down and cut my steak and didn't say a word. They were so flabbergasted that the meal was virtually silent except me asking my stepfather how his steak was a few minutes later. I signed the check, gave a big tip, and we walked out and said goodbyes. They've been nicer to servers each time that we've gone out since. My mum has been this person regularly throughout my life, but I do have one positive story with it. She and I went to eat at Portillo's when I was a teenager and we sat in the back of the restaurant where it was more private so we can eat in peace. About 10 minutes into our meal, 2 people come into the empty area and sit down 2 tables away from us. Turns out it was a manager and an employee that was getting written up. The manager was being a complete asshat towards the employee, criticizing and belittling them. My mum put down her food and walked over and started yelling at the manager for being such an asshole. She went on a rant about how rude and wrong it was of him to do this in front of the public 2 tables away from customers and really let him have it. She demanded the phone number of the manager above him and we left after she received it. I was pretty embarrassed at the time, but as I got older I realized that she was standing up for that employee and how wrong that manager really was. I'm not 100% sure what she did with that phone number, because I lived with my dad and I had to go home after that meal. We traveled a lot when we were younger and would skip lines at the airport since we were kids. But now we were all in our early teens and my mum faked having a heart condition to skip the long line to get on the airplane. Flight attendant would have none of it and told us to go back to the end of the line. I still remember the smiles and looks of everyone there.